millennial generation is they are, from my perspective, an exceptional. There's a lot of talk about, the millennial generation is different, but they are different. But if they're motivated in accordance with what drives them, you can get phenomenal results out of it. And one of that is they want transparency. They want to know that they own something, and they want to know that they're constantly developing professionally and personally.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Today we're going to talk about what really grows companies. And we're not going to talk about technology. We're not going to talk about the idea or the strategies. We're not even going to talk much about the people. Today's interview is really about the core foundation of what makes us who we are. What I believe is that when you are clear about the values at which you live by, that you have a much higher chance to be happy, to be able to create the success you want, and to be able to have the kind of relationships that you desire. Those values really are an important part to who we are and where we're going. Now, it's the same inside of companies, because companies that have core values, I've seen operate at a higher level. They have more collaboration, more trust. They grow faster. When you have these values and you really live by them, it provides something that you just can't get by focusing on technology and strategy. Today's guest is Shawn Lipman. Shawn is a co-founder of Feedonomics. And what we talk about today is living the core values. Understanding that values are a central part to a culture and your leadership, but how do you go beyond just putting them on the wall? Well, you live by them, you hire by them, you lead by them, you fire by them. That's what we talk about in today's interview. He is the co-founder of Feedonomics. They were number 95 on the 2019 list, over $7 million in revenues. They currently have over 150 employees, and they wouldn't have been able to do it unless they had central values or principles that guided them. So today we talk about living those values and why it's important and how you can do it too. Before we dive into the interview, I wanted to remind you that you can actually get a tool that I've been working with clients with for the last couple of years. I've refined this tool that's gone through several iterations. Now we have it completely automated. You can actually go online and fill out the leadership quiz. To get the leadership quiz, just go to theleadershipquiz.com. That's pretty easy, right? Theleadershipquiz.com. What you will get when you do that is you will answer a few questions. You will see where you rate based on the core principles of fast growth companies. If you're ready to grow your company or you want to see where you are, then make sure you go to theleadershipquiz.com. Inside it, you will get insight to where you are, understand where you want to improve, and you will get them mapped into the 10 areas that are most specific to fast growth companies. Again, go to theleadershipquiz.com and you can get that right now. Now, here's the interview with Shawn. Shawn, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I've already told our audience a little bit about you, but I'd love to hear about the company. So tell us about Feedonomics.
Well, we started actually as a digital marketing agency. My closest friend from university for now 30 plus years, more than 30 years, and two young geniuses, Brian and Robert Roizen, who we were in our late 40s and they were in their early 20s. We came together and we were running a digital marketing agency together. And we solved a very, very large problem with technology, and they're technology geniuses. And we pivoted it out of the digital agency into what we now do, which is using Feedonomics as a technology platform for managing data feeds and product feeds in e-commerce and beyond.
Love it. And you've got about 150 employees, is that right?
Yeah, by the end of this year, I think we're going to probably be over 200. So it's been quite a wild ride.
When I talked to you last week about what makes your company grow, what really does drive fast growth, I mean, you were on the Inc. list at number 95 over 7 million in revenue, over 3,000% growth in 3 years.
Yeah.
You had talked about the importance of values. Why are values so important across the company?
I'll be honest with you, it's not, values aren't important across the company. They're, quite frankly, pretty important in life. So, right? So there's kind of this misconception that, it's a kind of a really interesting or cool thing to have like a culture or a set of values in order to drive some type of, growth initiative. From my perspective, I come from a sporting background and also have built another culture-based company. And for me, it's just, you have to have foundation in life. You have to have a core set of values and principles, which really forms the glue that you hold anything in your life together, whether it's your family or teams or a company. And so from the very beginning, we aligned around a very, very defined set of principles, which we hold ourselves accountable to, and then have held everybody who's come to this company accountable to. And quite frankly, I think that's a big reason why we've been able to, without any funding, build the company we have.
I am really surprised when I talk to founders just like yourself that don't have a focus on values. They focus on technology and strategy and whatnot. And I'm like, well, what are some of the challenges you have? And it always comes back to, well, we could do a better job on communicating. And I'm like, well, isn't that a core part of everything getting done in the business? So when you talk about operationalizing the values, what does that mean to you?
It starts from recruiting. Look, everybody, the technology is built by people. It's engineers. Our sales are made by people. Our accounting is done by people. Our fulfillment is, everything we do is people-based. And our clients are people. And so if you're not coalescing everybody around a common objective, a common set of values, how do you go in any kind of direction? And so the way that we service our clients has to come internally. You can't have one set of principles for how you're going to service your customers if you're not doing that for your employees. And so it really starts with recruiting, ensuring that everybody understands that this stuff is really important, and then it's living it, because you can have it all on the wall, but if you're not actioning it and modeling behavior, nobody's going to follow you. So it really comes from, from the top. You have to live your values.
You said living the values. I don't want to, step past that without explaining what that is. I was at a big speech. It was probably over 1,000 people. And it was the first time I've heard this operational values a couple of years ago. And it was through Brene Brown. Do you know Brene's work?
No.
So she's a fantastic speaker. She's a keynoter, and she's got 5 best-selling books. And she had asked this audience, how many of you truly live by and operationalize the values beyond just putting them on the wall? And only 18 people, I counted them, and they all happened to be together in one row. Turned out they were one company. Mm-hmm. So there was it was such a small percentage of the people that were living the values. Give us an example of something you've done besides recruiting that you are living the values day in and day out with the company.
Well, we have some very fundamental principles, which we modeled actually off of a book called Legacy by a guy named James Kerr. And it's interesting because I was using it in rugby coaching to develop culture within a sporting team. And really the book speaks to how do you leverage those principles, which are founded on the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, who have the longest, the most successful sporting team of all time. They have over 100 years and 90-plus win record. So the whole concept is, what are the elements, what's the DNA that's enabled them to have sustainable excellence? And when you're building a company, really that's what you want to do. You want to build a culture of sustainable excellence. And so some of the principles are exceptionally simple, right? No egos, servant leadership. There's a concept called cleaning the sheds, sweeping the sheds, which is, in their context, the best players and the captains of the team, after they play an international, they will sweep the changing rooms. Nobody else cleans up after them. They take ownership for the small things. And so these are the type of concepts that, quite frankly, you can't speak about. You got to actually model them, right? You can't tell other people that you guys have to have no egos, but then your leadership are walking around with egos. And then the other piece is ensuring that the people that you bring in, you have companies which they need those the game changers, right? And many times those people can be very good individually, but they can destroy your culture. So it's ensuring that you never ever acquiesce to the individual in advance of the whole. And really, those are the types of things we do: creating a learning environment, ensuring people are asking the why, creating a culture of curiosity. But you can't, if you don't say them, if you don't create, then all the premise behind it to teach people and to lead them, it's not going to happen.
Shawn just talked about ownership. In fact, he's mentioned it a few times already. I want to share with you some of the data from my research. When I looked at fast-growing companies, and I talked to a lot of founders about this, hundreds in fact, 88% of them will say ownership is important or very important. It's one of the top factors that really drive their success, is getting people to fully buy in, go beyond responsibility, beyond accountability even, to take ownership of their work and the client experience. 88%. And what do you do with that? Where are you on that spectrum? How many people on your team have taken full ownership, and not just the executive team? Everyone. Now back to the interview with Shawn. Is there anything specific you could share with us that you do in meetings, or you do in your quarterly retreats, or anything like that really reinforces the values?
The most important one was having peer ownership for it, because the challenge you have when you have this very integrated philosophy about your principles is it can become white noise if it's me telling everyone all the time, these are the principles, these are the principles. So everything we try and do is create a foundation where people recognize that it's important. We have everybody read the book, we speak about the principles, but in order to have them live them, we have to have our people own them. And so we do things like peer facilitation. So we ask for volunteers, and out of, we get about 30 to 40 people who say, I want to volunteer, and we assign them 5 people, and every month to 6 weeks, they sit down and they do a facilitation meeting with their peers. And so that could be an entry-level person straight out of college facilitating a meeting with directors, speaking about the culture, maybe 3 or 4 principles. Why is it important? How are we living them? How is it impacting our life? So that's one. And then the other concept we have in the company is we have a rule that if anything you need to escalate, whether it's if you're having a discussion about a process or about something going on with you, that you cannot get resolution with your senior, your supervisor, your manager, the rule is you have to escalate it to the next level. If you don't get resolution there, you have to escalate it all the way to me, because we don't want anyone, if we're saying we're creating a learning environment, and then people are finding that they're not able to get at least proper resolution, what happens is morale starts being impacted, and people stop asking why. They stop providing inputs. And so creating this freedom for people to know that they never have to stop is, I think, a very empowering thing in our company, and I think it's very important beyond.
Shawn, you said a few times the word ownership, and I'll be honest with you, I did a deep study with founders just like you, didn't record it, but I had 51 founders, and I asked this question, how do you get people to take responsibility for big goals when you're trying to grow the company? And I was corrected. All the founders said, we don't want them to take responsibility. We want them to take ownership. We want them to feel it. Mm-hmm. And that feeling of ownership is really the key. A lot of people think it takes financial tools like options or profit sharing, and that can work. But are you doing it like through your leadership and inspiring that feeling of ownership?
Yeah, I think we are. When you look at the kind of the makeup of our employees, it's a millennial generation, right? I think if you take me out of the mix, we're probably, our average age is 26, 27. And so when you look at the drivers for, let's call it the millennial generation, is they are, from my perspective, an exceptional, there's a lot of talk about, the millennial generation is different. But they are different, but if they're motivated in accordance with what drives them, you can get phenomenal results out of it. And one of that is they want transparency. They want to know that they own something, and they want to know that they're constantly developing professionally and personally.
Yep.
Not money. Of course, you got to pay people money, but that's not what makes them come to work and be exceptional every day. And so it's about creating an environment where we're talking to them, we're understanding how they're doing. Are they starting to get stagnant? Because once they start getting stagnant, or they feel like they're not progressing, or they have a career arc, they either get bored or they leave. And so our retention rate right now is probably around 95% in a high growth tech company, which is kind of crazy. And it's not something we take for granted. And so the next step that we implemented is we actually just hired what we call a people empowerment manager, whose primary job is to ensure that all the things we say that we want to do are actually happening. Because the one challenge you have is, as you get older, bigger, is that all of these concepts, it's not that you don't want to do them, but you get so busy, you just don't do them very well. And so now what you're creating is a fragmentation. Some people get some of it and some people don't. And we want to make sure that everybody in this company is getting that immersion in culture, philosophy, and having a pathway to know that we are interested in their success.
Now wait just a second. Shawn just talked about millennials. I don't know if you know this, but my wife, Amanda Hammett, is an expert in understanding millennials. And if you have millennials in your workforce, she would love to talk to you about this. Maybe you want to understand them. Maybe you want to lead them to a higher level. One of the things she's known for is this collision course, this where are you heading if you're avoiding the millennial hiring. Now, a lot of people that are probably listening to this don't avoid it, but they're probably perplexed around how do you get more from this experience with them? How do you retain them? Because there's a lot of issues going on. They're not unlike yourself. So if you talk to Amanda, you'll make sure you understand them a little bit better. She's the millennial translator. And I just wanted to share that with you in case you had any issues or conversations that are necessary around millennials in the workplace. Now back to the interview. I love that you talk about that. My wife is a millennial generation expert. She's on a trip right now. She's going to be working with one of the police forces in South Carolina about how to connect and lead this next generation of leaders. When you talked about transparency, it's not just the millennials. Like all of us want to be included. We want that level of openness, right?
It's 100%. It's 100%. The difference for our generation was it was never available to us, right? It was very prescriptive management, top-down management.
Yeah.
And so it's not like we didn't want to be heard or we didn't want to have all of the same things, being impactful, feeling it just was pitch up, do your thing. And that's not what drives successful businesses. And when you look at some of the visionary leaders from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, great sporting coaches, great business leaders, they were doing this stuff before anyone was even writing books about it.
Yeah.
They were doing it. And that's why they had such great success, building trust. But now, obviously, there's much more awareness about it and much more, talk about it. But the thing is, you can read all these great books about leadership and empowerment, but if you don't actually live them, it's just theoretical.
I wrote an article years ago where I was really excited about it because I just saw this everywhere where your learning is hurting you. People feel like they read a book and they're like, oh, okay, I know that, but you're not applying it. And that's what you're talking about. We understand we have values and principles that drive us, but we're living it day in and day out. When you think about companies that don't have that central framework for these values and principles, what would you say to a leader like that's struggling with communication or something like that?
Look, I'll be honest with you. If there's not real buy-in, real buy-in, I will say don't do it. It's worse. It would be better to then go, create your structure, make sure you got your systems in place, be prepared for the outcome, which is potentially employee retention challenges, potentially customer retention challenges. Some companies are able to really succeed without it. They got a product, they hit it at the right time, they're in the right space, and they potentially properly and well funded. But I don't think that that's a foundation for sustainable performance. I think they can have their moment in the sun. But the other part of it is, so if there's not absolute buy-in from leadership, it will not work, because people see through it and it becomes disingenuous, and it creates a major problem with trust. And there's a concept I want to just throw out that I read in a great book by Patrick Lencioni. I don't know if you've heard, he did The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and all of these kind of business fables. And it's this concept of the pyramid of success, where people always focus on the results, which is at the top, but everything is predicated on trust. And so if you establish an environment of trust, then you can have conflict, you can get commitment, accountability, and then you can have results. And so you have to build trust first. Your people have got to believe that what you're saying is true.
Well, I will say, no one knows this yet, but we're going to have Patrick Lencioni on the show coming up soon. So
he's amazing.
Yep. We just had John Maxwell. So that hasn't aired yet, but I guess when this comes out, it probably will have already aired. Well, Shawn, I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your wisdom around values. And I do agree with you. It's not something that we do as a recipe for our companies to grow. We must have them as individuals. I think we can even have them as families.
Yep.
And it allows us to really bind together and hold each other accountable to where we're going together. So thank you for sharing all that here on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Wrapping up that interview was really powerful, because I really love this stuff. I love this. And in fact, it's a central part of my work. Not only do I help companies find their core values, but I help leaders themselves. And leaders are more clear about what their values are and how they must show up as the company evolves and moving to the next level. It is a central part of the work I do as a coach, and it really does. Everything hangs together off that. Now, if you want to know what your core values are as a personal leader, and you want to figure that out with me, I'd love to have a conversation with you. If you are feeling any kind of doubt or unsure of yourself or lack of courage or not really being intentional the way you want to, then let's sit down and have a chat. I can help you figure out exactly what's missing and help you move forward. My name is Gene Hammett. You can find me at genehammett.com. And if there's anything I can do for you, make sure you reach out. I'd love to help you, share some resources, and have a conversation. Just go to gene@genehammett.com for my email. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.